It's exactly 6 o'clock, so with your permission, let me kick off the session. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of AIMA's popular program, Leaders Speak. It is with great pride I introduce to you today our speaker for the evening, a true soldier, a former chief of army staff, and a true leader who has commanded an army of 12 million. He was the army chief during the Kargil War, and he planned and executed Operation Vijay to successfully defeat Pakistan's intrusion into the Kargil sector in 1999. He made us all super proud and super grateful to him and his brave soldiers who kept India safe. He's also a true friend of AIMA, and I'm grateful to him for agreeing to travel all over the country to address and inspire young students and professionals and share the true meaning of leadership with them. He's one of our most popular speakers of the Shaping Young Minds program, which AIMA organizes for young people around the country in partnership with our LMAs. A very warm welcome to you, General Malik. Delighted that you are here, and it's always an inspiration to listen to you. We are all eager to hear your views on the ongoing standoff between India and China, which is taking up all the TV space and all the newspaper space these days, along with, of course, COVID. So with these few words, I'm pleased to hand over the session to Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, President AIMA, to take it forward. You're on mute, Mr. Kirloskar.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, it's a great pleasure to have you with us, and a very warm welcome for a discussion on India's security in the face of Chinese aggression. We're privileged to have General Malik, VP Malik, with us. He was chief of the Indian Army during the Kargil War, as Ms. Sethi mentioned, that our brave soldiers won. He served on the National Security Advisory Board and has been actively involved with security think tanks. He also advises companies on leadership issues. General Malik, many thanks for agreeing to do this session, and a very warm welcome to you in AIMA's Leaders Speak program. Ladies and gentlemen, the Galwan incident has highlighted the growing friction between India and China over territory. For decades, the border between our two countries has remained peaceful despite the lack of a mutually accepted boundary. Now, both nations have become economic powerhouses and both aspire for superpower status. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that China has a gross domestic product which is 4 times ours, as they started their liberalization program before we did. So China enjoys a lead in that race, but of course, we are not prepared to cede our territorial claims. However, we must do something about our security in order to deal with the intensifying China syndrome. From the late 1980s, when the Chinese paramount leader Deng Xiaoping made the strategy for China to re-emerge on the world stage, its leaders have stayed true and laser-focused on implementing it. And now, unlike India, which is preoccupied with domestic economic and ethnic issues, China is busy expanding its sphere of influence across the world. It is using its newly created industrial and financial might to build a network of dependent nations on every continent. It has planted itself also in India's neighborhood with economic and military assistance. So we either need a change of attitude or strategy towards our smaller neighbors to ensure that China's string of pearls around us doesn't turn into a noose. However, as is evident, resistance to Chinese expansion is building around the world, especially after its egregious actions in Hong Kong recently, in the past few days. India seems to have emerged as a pivot of America's strategy to contain China, while America is focused on using India to keep the Indian Ocean free of Chinese dominance. We must worry about our longest and toughest land border with China. Our place in the world, of course, depends on our ability to defend our borders. And I believe that now more than ever, we should remember Henry Kissinger's famous words. A nation does not have any permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests. We are privileged to have General Malik with us this evening, and we are eager to hear his prognosis for India's security and his prescription for ensuring it. Over to you, General.
Thank you. Thank you, Rekhaji, and thank you, Mr. Kirloskar. It's always a pleasure to be doing something with AIMA. Coming to today's subject, we are dealing with a strategic subject, and I always remind people that at strategic level, we require a long memory and a longer foresight and vision. If our memory is missing, it can lead to wrong assessments and decision making. And therefore, I'll give you a very brief glimpse of our history with China, just with slide number 1, only to just remind you of what all has happened till recently. Can we have slide number 1, please? Thank you. Out of all these timelines that I have given, I will elaborate only a couple of them which are important because most of these are well known to you. This is just a reminder. Let me start with the first one, October 1950, because that is the most important. And that is the time our China syndrome, frankly, began, when China annexed Tibet in October 1950. Can you come to the second slide, please? When China annexed Tibet in October 1950, Sardar Patel, a month later, he wrote a long letter to our Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And in that letter, he said, the Chinese government has tried to delude us by professions of peaceful intentions. They have managed to create a false sense of confidence in their so-called desire to settle the Tibetan problem by peaceful means. This action of the Chinese is little short of perfidy. And in that very long letter, he also suggested a reappraisal of the Chinese threat and what our security needs will be in future, which should be looking after. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru did not respond to this letter. And unfortunately, 5 weeks later after he wrote this letter, Sardar Patel passed away. Thank you. We can come to the next one. The next slide, please. Yes. Now, this is I thought, more important one in our present context. March 1963, China and Pakistan, they signed an agreement. In fact, that is the beginning of their alliances, in which Pakistan ceded Shaksgam territory. It's over 5,500 square kilometer territory. If you see slightly to the right on top, Shaksgam is written there with yellow background. And I have also indicated from there Daulat Beg Oldie with another arrow, which is in our territory. Now, since then, of course, this has become an all-weather alliance between China and Pakistan, and it has grown many-fold since then. China has given the nuclear secrets, missile technology, all kinds of weapon systems to them. And they have also been supporting them in United Nations, even on the terrorist front. And of course, the latest issue is the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is over 60 billion worth. And that passes through the Gilgit agency, which we in India, we claim to be ours. Now, starting with 93, thank you with this slide. You can just leave these slides at the moment. Starting with 1993, India and China started signing. I'm now talking of 1998. Our Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had gone to China after Wang Dong and all that. And after that, the peaceful talks started between India and China. And in 1993 onwards, we have signed several agreements and protocols with China on confidence building measures. These are to ensure that even if our troops come in contact with each other, they do not fire. They're also about the flying of our military aircraft in close proximity to each other, and also about major exercises, military exercises that are to be done. But all these, from the very beginning, are related to the line of actual control. Unfortunately, despite so many meetings that have taken place since then, we have not been able to convince China to mark the line of actual control on the maps. Neither their perception, and therefore we have also not given our perception of line of actual control. In some meetings, they have agreed that yes, there are some disputed areas, but otherwise the line of actual control has never been given by the Chinese, and therefore it remains ambiguous. And I can also use the word flexible as far as China is concerned. And because of that, they have often exploited, or they have often exploited coercive and applied coercive strategy along the line of actual control. I'll come to that a little later. Mr. Kirloskar has already mentioned about the rise of China and how well they have been doing in the past. Let me say that, yes, they are a global power today, second only to USA, and the economy has grown almost about 5 times ours. It is a recognized nuclear state, while we are not. And it has the largest standing army in the world. Its defense budget, incidentally, last year was 3.5 times greater than ours. They spent 261 billion US dollars, and we spent 71 billion US dollars. So it's 3.5 times longer. It has larger, and it has been so for many, many years. China, incidentally, is self-reliant when it comes to defense equipment. And in fact, it is also a major exporter of arms and equipment. Now, China has always been competing with USA and other rising powers, particularly on the military issues. And yet, surprisingly, as Mr. Kirloskar has also brought out, that it has made USA and other countries dependent on it as far as trade is concerned. And it has done the same thing with us as well as with Japan. And today, while our trade turnover is 80 billion US dollars, but we are in the negative as far as trade is concerned by almost about 50 billion US dollars. Now, I'll quote something from Paul Kennedy in his very famous book, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers. In that book, he has stated, and I'm quoting him, long-term shifts in economic productivity of nations are coterminous with the increase or decrease of their global influence, or you can also say global power. Now, the hegemonic rise of China, this has coincided with the rise of their present president, Xi Jinping, since, I would say, 2013, 2014. He is the chairman of the China Military Commission, which is the senior-most body as far as the military is concerned. And thus he controls the PLA. He is president of China with no time limit for his tenure. Many people consider him to be a dictator in China today. Now, President Xi started his tenure with a massive overhaul of the PLA, People's Liberation Army, with a direct hands-on approach. He started their modernization, he started their reorganization, he managed to integrate their Army, Navy, Air Force, missile command, etc., and put them in an integrated manner in the 5 theater commands that they have today. And he has showcased the PLA with himself as its leader on many occasions, in fact, as many occasions as possible, both for domestic as well as for the foreign audience. And you find a very large number of video clips that we see these days. He has popularized what he called China Dream, which really implies great revival of the Chinese nation. And while describing China Dream, he has promised return of territories which at one time were territories under the Middle Kingdom. China Dream has now become, has taken a strong nationalistic character. And also with that is the personal image of Xi Jinping. And the China Dream, as well as the modernization of the armed forces that he has introduced, it has given a great sense of pride as well as boldness to the PLA soldiers and their military leaders. Since 2013-14, China has followed assertive and expansive foreign policies. It has expanded its influence in Eurasia, in Africa, and of course in India's neighborhood also, by offering massive infrastructure aid, and also on the what they call the Belt and Road Initiative. Incidentally, the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and India refused to join that. Can we have the next slide, please? By occupying, no, the next one, yes, thank you, yeah. By occupying and deploying its, yes, this is the one, and deploying its military on many islands in the South China Sea, China has flouted United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And this particular law, I wish to remind everyone, is the basis of determining maritime entitlements, sovereign rights, jurisdiction, legitimate interest, even maritime traffic, and of course the other claims like the exclusive economic zone, that what we call EEZ. And just to remind everybody here, only a few days ago, the Japanese Defense Minister, Taro Kono, said that China is trying to change the status quo unilaterally in East China Sea, South China Sea, in Hong Kong, and now with its border with India. Thank you. We can take off that slide, please. Why does China keep creating frequent LSC face-offs? I can list many reasons, but the important ones, let me put it. One, as a pressure tactic to nibble territories claimed by China, particularly where it has, which are considered to be disputed. And it keeps asserting that Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, and many parts of Ladakh, in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, they belong to China, south of the watershed, which we have always considered as the boundary. Two, to stop us from developing defense infrastructure near the line of actual control. The present problem in Galwan Valley is also the new road that we have constructed going from Darbuk Shiok to Daulat Beg Goldi and close to Karakoram Pass. Can we have the next slide, please? Particularly wherever China thinks that this infrastructure is may become a threat at one stage to Chinese territories. Yeah, the last slide, please. Next one. Thank you. Now, you see here, I'm putting my pointer on it. This is area which has been ceded by Pakistan, Shaksgam Valley. Now, between China and Pakistan, they feel that the tri-junction between two nations goes from here to the east of Karakoram Pass. While we are at the moment, because we consider Siachen to be our territory, and also of course the Gilgit-Baltistan also, we are at the moment holding this line, Saltoro Ridge along the Siachen Glacier, and this is the Siachen Glacier. So we are holding this particular line where our troops are, but they, along with China, Pakistan and China, they consider that this is the claim line for Pakistan. China looks at Darbuk Shiok Road, which is somewhere in this area, as a possible link to China's Xinjiang area or to the area which has been ceded by Pakistan to because of the proximity and Karakoram Pass, which is located close by here. Here, I just want to explain to you once again, to the east of this area is Aksai Chin, which is occupied by them, but claimed by us. And then to the north is Shaksgam Valley, which I have already indicated to you, and to the west is the Karakoram Ridge Line and Siachen Glacier, which are claimed by Pakistan. And here I'm showing this map because this is the area where the strategic interest of Pakistan and China both coincide in this particular region. There's another aspect I think I wish to highlight here. For many years now, I would say almost about 10 to 12 years, while we have been talking about length of our boundary with China to be 3,588 kilometers, but China officially has been talking about it to be as 2,000 kilometers. Why? Why? Because they exclude length of the territory which separates Ladakh with Tibet and Xinjiang. And mind you, the Chinese are far-sighted. They don't make such mistakes, particularly on the strategic issues. And that is why when we abrogated Article 370 and we also created this Ladakh as the Union territory, there were very strong protests by China, not only to us, but also in the United Nations. You can take off this map, please. Thank you. Now, the last reason, of course, could be that they are always warning us to not to get close to the US and US allies over security issues, which we have been doing in the recent past, particularly with our exercises, particularly in the ocean, India-Pacific Ocean. And also keep on coercing us to join their projects like the BRI. Belt and Road initiatives. I've just listed a few of these reasons, which, of course, they will not explain it, but as one can make out, these are the reasons why they have been opposing and fingering us more frequently in the recent time. Let me come to the present situation along the line of actual control now. In the recent past, one has noticed many intrusions into our territory are in those territories which are considered to be disputed territories. And we've had in Demchok, we've had in Chumar, we've had in Depsang, Doklam, which lasted for a long time. And now, of course, since April, we are having it at Nakula in Sikkim, north of Pangangso, and in the Galwan Valley. I think China seems to, over the years, China seems to be convinced that it can hurt us more than we can hurt them along the line of actual control. And that is why these have now started becoming more frequent. The present face-off, which started in April, is quite different to the face-off that we've seen earlier. Firstly, it is obviously a premeditated attempt to disturb the status quo with higher buildup of forces at several points simultaneously, which I have already listed: Nakula, Pangangso, Depsang, Galwan Valley, etc. And this time, the troops that they have used are not the border guards, but these are regular mechanized division force, which has been brought from outside with all its heavy weapons. Although when it comes to, recent past, we had these problems in Galwan Valley, they did not use these weapons. They used a new weapon, quite medieval weapon of those wooden clubs with nails and barbed wire, etc., which is as effective as a gun to kill people. So this time the intrusion has been quite different, both in size as well as in the kind of troops that have been deployed. What is the immediate aim that one can see? Obviously, to me, it appears that they want to seize tactically important ground, particularly in Galwan Valley, where they can oversee, they can influence the movement along the road which goes from Darbuk to Daulat Beg Oldi. And we have constructed, and we have spent a long time as well as a huge amount of money to construct this road. So that is one. And of course, it seemed that they wanted to occupy the area north of Pangangso, that you would be hearing about those Finger 4 to Finger 8 area, which was disputed and where both sides had been patrolling till recently. So what happened on the 15th June, particularly after that, both sides have now inducted extra forces. We have also inducted large amount of forces now, and the people are have taken positions on the ground, and they are on high alert, both sides. While the military as well as diplomatic level talks have been going on, but I would say till yesterday, somehow I think that talks have not yielded adequate or satisfactory results. While the talks are going on, and I don't know how long will they go. One is a little afraid that they shouldn't get into the winter mode because that will be that will make things more difficult for us. There are many questions that people ask me quite frequently. The first, of course, is can Indian forces thwart further encroachment into our territory? And I believe yes. So my answer to that is yes, we can thwart. Should our armed forces apply kinetic force to evict the Chinese in Pangangso or any other area? I believe diplomacy should be given full chance. Escalating a conflict or getting into a war situation is neither good for us, nor for China, nor for the world, if I can use that word. And Of course, this present situation cannot be taken indefinitely. Any application of force, I believe, will escalate the situation much faster. We have to keep that in our mind all the time. Can this situation escalate into a full-fledged India-China war? I don't believe so. I think they know our strength, like we know their strength. And both are nuclear nations, let's not forget that. Everybody knows in the world. China will lose much more, I believe, in the international level if we have that kind of a situation. Can this situation develop into a Kargil type event? Well, I cannot rule it out at the moment. But again, I feel that China will have much more to lose in the long run. There are many people who tend to compare our force level with the Chinese force level. I think that is a wrong thing to do. Every country has got its own different security commitments. Combat superiority, really speaking, depends upon the force level which one can bring and sustain at the point of impact. The PLA, no doubt, is technologically superior today, particularly when it comes to cyber war or space war or even in information war. But in terms of human resource, and I have practical experience of that during the Kargil war, I do believe that our troops are far better. They are committed, more determined, and more experienced in mountain warfare. And incidentally, our Air Force and Navy also have an edge over PLA when it comes to defending our own territory, whether it is the Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean around us, or when it comes to the border that we have with China as far as the sky border is concerned. Well, I now come to my prognosis and recommendations for the way ahead. Well, even if the present face-off, it is resolved as we have been doing in the past, I do believe that China will persist in pushing us back in the Shok, Daulat Beg Oldie sector, as well as in the northeast, because they claim the whole of Arunachal Pradesh, particularly Tawang, and they will exploit any weakness in our Himalayan defenses. At the tactical and operational level, I foresee larger deployment of forces in the Himalayas. In fact, the line of actual control that we have with China may become quite like the line of control that we have with Pakistan. Unfortunately, it will be a lot more costly to maintain forces due to high altitude, due to ruggedness of the terrain, and poor lines of communication that we have from mainland India. But the impact this time, I think, will be much more at strategic level. These frequent face-offs are not only about territories, I believe, territories along the line of actual control. I think now they are becoming about Chinese hegemonism, their nationalism versus our nationalism, and China with its political, military, and commercial aggressiveness will continue to thwart India's national interest, whether these are territorial or economic or in political or diplomatic field. I think for too long we have hesitated to impose costs on China's military and adventurism in these face-offs. And we have always preferred to settle matters diplomatically. I think time has come to dispel the Chinese assumption that such aggression will bring India to the negotiating table always, and India will grant some concessions to China as a price for peace and tranquility. Maybe it is time now for us to reset and recalibrate our relations with China, as Mr. Kirloskar also mentioned. Anything in between? Can I continue? Yeah. So, as I said, it is time to reset and recalibrate our relations with China, and for that, at least in our middle and long-term interest, we need to develop robust political will, economic, digital, and military tools to protect our national interest. What can they be? First, I would say the Himalayan border requires not just border management, but ramping up of our military capabilities, asymmetric, and to deter and to dissuade China so that they don't keep indulging in these face-offs again and again. We need to expedite our infrastructure, both for the civilian population as well as for the military in this region. And we also need to create unconventional as well as asymmetric options to counter any future aggression. I'm now referring to the local population or even population just across on the other side. Number two, review India's economic and trade policies with China. And I think there are some indications already which we are seeing from our government. Three, enhance our strategic ties with ASEAN as well as Quad nations. It looks at the moment that ASEAN countries as well as the Quad countries, which include China and Japan, Australia and Japan, at the moment they are thinking on the same lines as we are thinking as far as strategic issues are concerned and as far as China is concerned. We need to maintain good relations in the neighborhood. Of course, it is important. But we also need to look at their relations with China with greater sensitivity. They cannot be given total freedom. And so we have to also keep reminding them about our own national interest when they take some steps which may harm our interest. And lastly, I would say be prepared to call out China on Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong, and join other nations who wish to isolate China globally. And this is the right time. So I'll end my talk with a personal experience, strategic experience, as far as dealing with China is concerned. Incidentally, I must remind you that my first combat action was in 1962 in Ladakh. From 1962 to 64, I was posted as a young officer with my battalion. I believe now that China is a cunning strategic opponent. It lulls its political adversary to sleep or put it at a comfort level before striking at the military level. I do believe that today, China has become India's #1 security challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, General. That was quite a presentation. I was struck by how President Xi has become a dictator, but at the same time has made all the Chinese believe in the China dream, which is restore China back to its glory. And they seem to be taking all their neighbors on at the same time, whether it's in the South China Sea or whether it is us. They seem to be, getting more and more confident. Just one short question before we take questions from everyone else. When I saw your last slide, which showed what's happening at the tri-junction with Pakistan and China, I was reminded of what's going on with Nepal and India, which also happens to be at a tri-junction. Do you think that there is any coordination going on?
Well, it can't be ruled out, frankly. Although China is not speaking a word about it, and the Nepalese also are not saying anything about it, but there is no doubt that the present regime in Nepal, which is pro-communist, and probably has got more signal communication with China than it has with India. So I won't rule it out, frankly.
Okay. We have one of your old friends, Mr. Sudhir Jalan, who also happens to be our past president. He is on this Zoom call. Mr. Jalan, do you have a question? Is he muted? Or let me take the first question. It's from Mr. Mohammad Anis Ansari. He says the root cause of the Ladakh conflict appears to be the perception of China that in case of Western offensive against China, India will side with the West. And two, something that you also mentioned, abolition of Article 370. Jalan, could you mute? The number two is abolition of Article 370 affecting status of Ladakh as a union territory. And Mr. Ansari, yes, General Malik.
Yeah, that question, I think as far as Article 370 is concerned, I have already mentioned that they have done it well, and they are siding with Pakistan. And I do believe that over the years now they have accepted that Gilgit-Baltistan area, as well as the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, now it belongs to Pakistan. Earlier, they considered it as a disputed territory, but over the years now they have accepted that the whole of J&K, particularly this area of Siachen Glacier, as well as Gilgit-Baltistan, and it belongs to Pakistan. So that is why they continue to take the Pakistani side. Plus, maybe that they are also considering that it can become a threat in time to come if it becomes a problem there. As far as siding with the Western nation is concerned, yes, but then every country has strategic understanding with others. We are not into any alliance with any Western countries, but yes, we are closer to them strategically. And I think primarily it is because of China itself. So I see no reason why should they be objecting if they continue to finger us.
Thank you. Mr. Jalan, you have a question? You are on mute, Mr. Jalan.
Mr. Jalan.
He's on mute.
Mr. Jalan, you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, General Saab. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you.
Good to see you. You have made a masterful presentation as usual. I totally agree with you, particularly on 2 points. One, China's game is not territorial. Secondly, they are extremely cunning. And I think what I have 2 questions. One, have they learned from the wonderful strategy started by you personally in Operation Parakram, when you did kind of coercive diplomacy on Pakistan? Are they hitting us back in the same coin by doing coercive diplomacy along with Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and all this? Second question is, do we have a latent fear that they have formed this huge dam in Tibet? They can either reduce the water of Brahmaputra or at times flood us? Is that a potent threat? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jalan. As far as the first question is concerned, you are giving me unnecessary credit for Operation Prakram. I had by that time retired, but I was involved in, of course, Operation Vijay, Kargil sector. And then my successor was involved. Yes, to some extent, what you're saying is right, that the Chinese, this time with all their forces that they have brought in, they may be indulging in coercive action to be able to occupy the areas, particularly this area of Pangangso where they seem to have dug in. I'm not too sure whether they can stay in Galwan Valley, but in the Pangangso area, north of Pangangso, they appear to be dug in already. Yes, it is possible that they may be indulging in that. Now, your second question about the damming of Brahmaputra River, which in their part of in Tibet. You know, I have a slightly different opinion on that. My information is that almost 60 to 65% of the water that flows in the Brahmaputra is because of the rainfall on our side of the Himalayas. And only about 35 or 40% river water comes from the river on their side. So by constructing a dam, I'm not sure how much water they will be able to stop in Brahmaputra. My own feeling is that I don't think it is going to affect us very much. Maybe about, as I said, 30% or so. But most of the water that we have in Brahmaputra, it is because of the rainfall that we see in the tributaries of Brahmaputra on our side of the Himalayas.
Mr. Ganesh Natarajan wants to ask a question. His question, which he has sent, is against an enemy as crafty as China, don't we need a mix of military, economic, and diplomatic muscle flexing to keep them in control?
Why not? Certainly. But we have to develop that first to be able to take them on. Unfortunately, we are lagging behind, and I hope we will start developing that kind of muscle very soon.
Thank you. We also have Mr. Vandrewala on the call. Firdaus, a question from you.
Good evening, sir. We all know that China is a two-faced adversary. Then why do we believe in signed agreements? Have we not learned from Sardar Patel's letter of 1950? It's 70 years. It's a long time to absorb one letter, however long it may be. And why can't we do what China does? Give them a little bit of their own medicines. Why do we always react and not act? And where is the UN in all this? Why is the UN so quiet, the Security Council?
See, I think in that question you have raised a couple of issues, frankly. The first part is that when we could have taken them on, we were hesitant. Somehow our strategic culture has been such that our leaders were hesitant when we could have taken them on. For example, when they came to Tibet, you will not believe it if I tell you that we were even supporting them. We were sending rations from Calcutta via Darjeeling side to support their troops in Shagaam, these areas. So we made those mistakes in the earlier days. And then, of course, over the years, they have now advanced economically, technologically. And I always believe, I said that while, yes, we should maintain good military, but then, military as well as the economic side, they go hand in hand. And unless we improve ourselves both economically as well as technologically, we will always have this gap between their capabilities and our capabilities. We are catching up. we are doing better than what we did earlier. Earlier days, we never thought of two-front war, but now we started talking about it. We started thinking about it. So things are improving. Let's see how it goes in future. But more important point I would suggest to every one of you is economic development is required. Much faster economic development than we've had so far. The other aspect, as far as United Nations are concerned, I'm afraid the United Nations remains a tool of those who have the power in them, particularly Security Council, and they can all veto anything that comes up. It's always difficult to get your resolution through. Second thing is that United Nations over the year has lost its power. It's become more and more impotent thanks to even the superpowers like USA and other countries. So United Nations is not as effective as it used to be in the past.
Thank you. General, we have one question from Subhabrata Sarma, who is the president of the Guwahati Management Association. He would like to have your views on the Chinese claim of Arunachal Pradesh, whether the next target will be Arunachal Pradesh.
It cannot be ruled out. Actually, in 2000, I think 2005 or 2006, China and India had agreed that whichever locations there is a population, we will not claim for each other. And that was an understanding that was reached between Dr. Manmohan Singh and when he visited China. But soon after that, they started claiming Tawang. Now, Tawang is a populated area on our side. And because we said, no, that is not possible, we will not be able to give Tawang at all. And so they changed their stance. And now they have started calling Arunachal Pradesh at southern Tibet. So politically, they have been talking about it. And such a situation arising in the Northeast cannot be ruled out. We have to be prepared in that area also.
I believe that there is also a very important monastery in Tawang, which China has its eyes on. I think that's where the Karmapa Buddha comes from, or Karmapa Lama, I guess that's the proper designation.
Tawang is an important monastery, and even when the present Dalai Lama, he escaped Tibet, that time also he came via Tawang. And so Tawang is an important, I've been to that place many times. It is a very important monastery in that region. And somehow they feel that earlier days, here, let me speak to you. I mean, the other day I was speaking to people from Tibet, and the Tibetan people, one of their officials, he was telling me that China considered Tibet to be the palm, and there are 5 fingers which should belong to that palm, and therefore to China. And those 5 fingers are Ladakh, Nepal, Bhutan, Arunachal Pradesh, and have I missed out one? 5 fingers that he has mentioned. So they have these claims. You do not know when they will start. They are so flexible, and you don't know how far back they will take their claims. But they keep talking about these things, in the talks. So Arunachal remains a sensitive area. You're right.
I believe Mr. Siddhant Paul has a question.
Hello.
Yeah, Siddhant.
Hello, General. Thank you so much for your presentation and time. I have a quick question on India's nuclear doctrine, where we have adhered to a no first use policy. And my question is, strategically, does it make sense to give up that policy, given that our other neighbor, which is Pakistan, doesn't have one in place? And would that help in any kind of strategic deterrence on the Chinese border? And if we are to do that, how do you think strategically we could play that game?
Firstly, Mr. Kaul, this point has been considered by our government many a times. And again and again, we come back to the same conclusion, even in my time. And I think now, of course, I retired long ago, but even now, the government feels that the present policy is the right one. And I also tend to concur with that. As a policy, as a declared policy, I think it's the right thing. But when the tensions are there and when you get to know that the other country is trying to indulge in things like this, you do not know what kind of a decision-making will take place at that time. We have to keep it in mind. When the things are escalating, you don't know what may happen in the political mind at that time in our country. The other thing is that we are a very large country compared to Pakistan. Even if somebody tries to, and they manage to beat us as far as their bombing is concerned or something in some place, don't forget, if we do something, the whole of Pakistan will be no more. So, I do believe that what we are doing at the moment is the right policy. And the other thing, I have always believed that China now is #2 country in the world as a superpower. It's not easy for them to flout these kind of actions, nuclear doctrines and nuclear this thing. They have to show greater responsibility now. And therefore, I feel that between Pakistan and China, Pakistan continues to be a rogue country, but China, as far as nuclear aspect is concerned, may not be in that category.
There's a question from Mr. Vinod Kumar Khanna to General Malik. Sir, could you please throw some light on India's relations with Bhutan in the background of India-China face-off?
Well, we've had very good relations all along with Bhutan. And I think the credit goes to the Bhutanese government, the king, as well as the Indian government. And at the moment, economically, we have now started having many projects on the hydroelectric projects, which are benefiting both India as well as Bhutan. And we have always supported each other, whether it is foreign policy issues or economic issues. And Bhutan has problems with China also. But most of the time, Bhutan has been taking our advice, consulting us when they're dealing with China. They have some disputed areas in the north. And to some extent in the Doklam area also, this has been, but Bhutan is a very peaceful country, and they are not sort of indulging in having military confrontation with anybody. And if any military confrontation is required, I have a feeling they may ask us to help them in some way, which we may have to do that sometimes. So we have to be careful. We have to remember that. But at the moment, I would say that our relations with Bhutan are excellent, and hopefully they will continue to be like that.
General, I'm watching the clock as well. I don't know whether you want a hard stop at 7 or we can go on with a few more questions because the questions keep coming in.
I have no problem. I have no problem. I'll go with your timing, whatever's timing.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dhananjay Keskar would like to know that some time back, there were reports of internal challenge to President Xi. Is there any new information on that?
Recently there was some talk about people getting agitated on the manner in which Xi Jinping handled the COVID situation. in China. And so there were a lot of murmur there. And people had written things also at that time. Under dictatorship, one never knows. Any event can, today you have problem, they are having problem in Hong Kong. And although he's a very strong man, and I have a feeling he will never hesitate in using his military when it is required. But a certain amount of opposition to him after some time cannot be ruled out.
Mr. Joydeep Ghosh wants to know whether we should put more focus on raising bigger local regiments with sons of the soil along the Himalayan region from Ladakh to Arunachal, who are more accustomed to difficult terrain and high altitude by birth.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And I think we are already doing that to quite some extent. We have scouts from those which comprise troops from those areas. We have scouts in Ladakh, we have scouts in Himachal, as well as in Arunachal Pradesh. And so many areas we have scouts which are where the troops belong to that area, close to the line of actual control.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Mr. Yatindra says, I don't think this is a question. He wants to ask, actually, do we have this fighting spirit and grit to fight China like Vietnam gave them a bloody nose a few years ago, about 2 decades ago? And Saumitra Bhattacharya says, will India ever claim Tibet? I don't know under what grounds, but that's a question from him.
As far as the Vietnam War, 79 war, yes, they did give them a bloody nose. And after that, China remained quiet for quite some time. And but I do believe that our troops are, as I said earlier, they are, as far as our human resources is concerned, the man behind the gun is better than what the China has. Our man behind the gun is absolutely determined, and so let there be no doubt about that part. And we can handle them. The other part, what was the second part of the question?
Will India ever claim Tibet?
Tibet, yeah, that's a political issue. And I think I did suggest a bit during my last bit of talk.
General, I didn't know you were a diplomat as well. Mr. J.S. Narula wants to know why should media not indulge in jingoism so that trade and commerce is not affected. He says that our conflict is with the PLA, People's Liberation Army, and not with the people of China. Any comments?
Well, unfortunately, the public does tend to take side with the forces which are fighting. And I remember that the kind of national support that we got during Kargil war, absolute phenomenal, not only within India, but even abroad. The Indians, the NRIs abroad. So this is just so happens. I'm sure the Chinese also would be thinking on the lines about their PLA, etc. As a long-term policy, yes, you may say that we shouldn't, our fights are with the government and the forces and not with the people. But when this kind of a situation arises, when there is a fighting going on between the two forces, then it is quite natural for the public and also the media to take the side of their forces.
I believe at times like this, each country will use whatever weapon it has in its hands, and economic warfare is equally important. Is my point of view. I mean, how much you use it would be left to the government. But yeah, these are all tools in the hands of different countries.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And this is what we call the information warfare. You have to convince your own people that you are doing the right thing, and you have to convince the other side that they are doing the wrong things. So information war is important these days.
Yeah. So one last question, General. We won't be too, won't take too much of your time. Mr. Bharat Vaklu says, with intelligence gathering by India, both HUMINT and TechInt at a sophisticated level, how could pre-planned actions commencing April 2020 have been missed by us? Is our thinking not strategic?
This is an important point, the intelligence gathering, both by technical means as well as by human int. And unfortunately, we didn't have a good experience in Kargil war, I can say that. Things have improved much more today, a lot more today, and things are much better. But sometimes when you have these small parties, small activities going on, creeping, you can miss them in those areas. And even as far as the human int or surveillance is concerned, it's a vast border, and it has got very limited habitation in those areas. Our own deployments are not as vast or as large as we have against Pakistan. So all I would say is that one should always endeavor to see that these things do not occur. But yeah, this remains an important point which we have to always look at.
Okay, I have one last question from a good friend of mine, Mr. Deepak Premnarayan. He says, General, one believes that China has major economic issues. NPAs, that's non-performing assets, are over 30%. And if a major bank collapses, there would be very strong ripples. Any comments?
Look, I have also been hearing about their large non-profit assets, NPAs as we call them. And this is a story which I've been hearing for last about 10, 15 years now. I'm not an economist, but the kind of reserves that they have, foreign reserves that they have at the moment, they are in a pretty strong position. Of course, they have to keep employing their people to keep them busy. And this is what they have been doing all along, employing their people on the infrastructure projects, whether it is road construction, railway lines, and things of this nature. So they continue to employ their people, and sometimes they do not give them adequate pay, money to them, but they keep employing their people. So, so far I haven't seen any harm come to them as far as their NPAs are concerned. And they have pretty strong foreign exchange reserves with them, no doubt about that. But I think you should be able to answer this question better than I do.
Deepak is best. Deepak is a banker. He would know far more. Deepak, if you can unmute yourself, I see you on screen. You need to unmute.
I think we'll have to do it from one of my colleagues will have to do that.
Is someone doing that?
I hope so.
He's still on the mute.
Yeah, he's still on mute. I think they're searching his name. Unfortunately, he has not. Yeah, WhatsApp buddies, but he hasn't sent me the message. Other than the question.
Now he's unmuted now.
Yes, Deepak.
Now, Sanjay, thank you. And good evening, sir. I don't know whether you remember, we had dinner with Mr. Naresh Chandra in Johannesburg many years ago. But this is when my bank was there. Sir, but coming back to this, I gather from pretty reliable sources, including people who have been with institutions like the World Bank and in China now, who are rubbing shoulders with him, that the economy is heading for deep trouble. The real estate sector has collapsed substantially. If I might just step back, in 2015, when the stock exchange collapsed, the government had stepped in to help the grandmothers. This time, they may not be able to, sir. So this is just a feedback. And for various reasons, I might not be able to go into more details, but I just thought the reserves on one side are tied up with the US dollar, and it won't be very easy for them to pull that out.
Thank you. That's very informative. You know, these are the kind of things sometimes when they happen, then the leadership of that country tends to divert the attention of their people. That could be one reason why China is now taking pangas, if I use that word, with the neighboring countries as well as India. So you never know. Thank you for your information, Deepak.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we've come to the end of this Leader Speak session. On behalf of AIMA, may I thank General VP Malik for being with us well beyond the time that we had proposed. I learned a lot. This session has been extremely informative. And, based on this, in a few weeks, we will be having the former National Security Advisor, Mr. Shyam Saran, on as well. So at least I will be far better prepared to ask him questions next time. But thank you so much, General, for being with us this evening. I believe all our members have gained a lot thanks to everything that you have spoken about and told us about this evening. I shall now hand over to Rekha.
Thank you, Mr. Kirloskar, and thank you so much, General Malik. As usual, one was sitting spellbound listening to you. Nothing new. I have experienced it many times before, and I hope we have you with us many times again. I want to apologize to many of those people who had so many questions in the chat. I'm sorry we couldn't take all of them, but hopefully we'll get an occasion again with General Malik and we'll be able to take more questions then. So thanks a lot, everybody. Great having you with us, and look forward to your joining other Leaders Speak sessions in the coming week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirloskar, and thank you, Rekha.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, General Malik.
Thanks, everybody, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.